This programme is sponsored by the Bank of Nevis Limited. Thank you, the Bank of Nevis.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of On the Tourism Trail. I am your host, Pamela Martin, and I have a very special guest today, the Honourable Mark A G Brantley, the Premier of Nevis and the Minister of Tourism. Welcome, Premier Brantley.
Thank you for having me.
Good. First of all, let me congratulate you on a second term in office.
Thank you.
You have our best as you go forward into this new term. Tell us, what does it mean to you to have a second term in office to lead the island of Nevis?
Well, I think it's a huge honor. Truth is that coming from where I have come in terms of where I was born and my life path thus far, I think that it is an incredible honor for the people of Nevis to have chosen me to lead them not once now but twice. And so for me that's rather important. It also is important because of course we would have gone through a very difficult first 5 years, and for the people to have renewed confidence and continued confidence in my leadership and in the party that I lead, I think is truly for me heartwarming. So I see it as a tremendous honor to be able to serve the people of Nevis in this capacity for another 5 years.
Okay, and you're also the Minister of Tourism for another term.
Yes.
So what is your vision this time around? I mean, we've had the pandemic, which was almost 2.5 years out of your first term. So what is your vision for Nevis going forward in terms of tourism?
Well, clearly our objective in terms of tourism is to grow our tourism product, to become better known in the markets that we serve. The island, of course, has always catered to the higher end of that market. I think it's a niche that has done well for Nevis, but a niche I think that we can do better at. We need to work more closely with our hotels, with our product development, and we need to do more marketing in order to ensure that our island is known and that the people that we're seeking to attract know about us. We are making some strides in that regard. Airlift has been a huge problem for the island of Nevis.
Right.
We're now embarked on a significant project in the airport that we're hoping we can bring to fruition in short order. We recognize that a lot of our hotels have complained about the cost of electricity and the difficulties that they've experienced. We hope that by pursuing our renewable energy pursuits that we would be able to offer them some relief again in the very near future, which will dramatically reduce costs for them. But we've seen appreciable growth. We've seen the hotels doing much better this season. They've sort of been roaring back, if you will. The room rates and the average room rates are quite high, some historic highs. We see more restaurants being opened and catering. So I think that the signs are good. It's just for us now to continue to work at it and to ensure that we get to where we want to be, which is for Nevis to be one of the premier destinations in the Caribbean.
Right, so we're talking about Airlift. So Cape Air recently started their service back between Nevis and St Thomas. What are the indications of that flight going forward? They started in February 15.
They've started. The information I've had to date, of course, it's quite still young, but the information that I've had to date is that they've done fairly well. The flight is full or nearly full each time. The value to Cape Air, even though it's a small airline and a small plane that they're using, the value is their connectivity, because they have arrangements, code share arrangements with major airlines such as JetBlue, I think, American Airlines, United Airlines. So for the people of Nevis, they can easily book through Cape Air on one of those airlines to go to different parts in the United States via the U.S. Virgin Islands. The value also is, of course, we have a lot of our people who live in the USVI. And so this now opens up a link to allow us to go back and forth. There's currently 1 flight a day and 2 flights on Sundays. So we are hopeful that we can maintain that service. And we're looking at other airlines, including Win Air, resuming its service from St. Martin, that we're pursuing quite aggressively. So we are hopeful that we can get some activity back at the airport, even as, of course, we finalize our plans to expand the facility and really invest in it so that it becomes fit for purpose.
Okay, so when you say Win Air, you're looking at short term?
Well, those are discussions that are ongoing. I think I'm always reluctant to say things unless I have something to say. So I can say that we're in conversations. We're not yet sure as to where that's going to lead. We're having some discussions with them, and we're hopeful that Win Air, which has served Nevis for decades, that they might be willing to come back.
Okay, So since the pandemic, we're truly operating in a different arena. You know, the whole world has changed. What are some of the initiatives you wish to focus on in light of this? I mean, we're always talking about diversification, but what does that actually mean in the short, medium, and long term? You know, it's a word we hear often, but what does it mean in actual terms?
So I think that the realities of the pandemic is that it really resulted in our island being brought to a standstill. The economy ground to a halt, hotels were closed, and it really exposed the weakness in our economic matrix because we're still so heavily dependent on tourism. And with borders closed, no flights, no boats, nothing coming, we recognize that obviously tourism as we know it ceased.
Right.
In fact, I will say that we developed a plan in the short term to invite our brothers and sisters from St. Kitts to come over. And so this notion of staycation took over, and we thank them, as we have always done, that they responded positively, and they filled our hotels, they filled our bars and restaurants during that very difficult period. As a government, we sat down and we were concerned, deeply concerned, that this exposed a tremendous weakness in what we have. So diversification became our calling card. We have talked about it for a bit, but we decided that we had to do it. And we see some areas. One, financial services that we see is an area that is fit for growth, an area that we can invest more in. We had not been doing much by way of marketing.
We were very strong in that.
We were, and we continued to be strong, but we were not growing.
Right.
So we had sort of tapered off.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what we're now trying to do is to go out into the world once again to market this. I led a delegation to Miami late last year, and we have committed to doing at least 3 major road shows each year going forward. So financial services, we think, has tremendous potential. We also feel that tourism, as we know it, will continue to be a major part of our economy, but we have to do more. We have to diversify even within tourism. So
does that mean bringing in investors with different styles, types of hospitality accommodations?
It means some of that, but I always, I don't get caught up. There's a lot of discussion, particularly in the political space, about hotels and new hotels. I don't get too caught up in that because the existing hotels complain all the time that the level of occupancy isn't high enough.
Right.
So I always say, well, everybody's talking about getting new hotels, and that sounds fantastic. But if you get more hotels and we still can't fill the rooms, then what is the value? So ultimately what I'm seeking to do is to do more with what we have. I would love to see these existing hotels get up to 80 and 90% occupancy for more and longer periods during the year, as opposed to now being very full during Christmas and then they taper off. So that for me is important. So I'm not too fussed about additional hotel rooms. If it comes, it comes. I'm more about enhancing what we have, making it more attractive, making Nevis more attractive, because I think if we can do that, the rest falls into place.
Right, to become more of a year-round destination.
Absolutely. So that's important. And to approach different demographics. For example, we do very little with the African American community. There's an affluent African American community on the East Coast, and we do very little with them. So all of this, I think, is critical. So the tourism, it's going to continue to play a role. We just have to, I think, be better at it. We have limited resources, so the ability to use those resources in a better way, more targeted. For example, recently we would have sponsored an ad which played on Times Square on the jumbotrons. I think those are the kinds of ideas which are new to us, but certainly the kinds of ideas and opportunities that when we get them, we grab them. In terms of further diversification, we see renewable energy as a major plank of what we're trying to do. That if we can get this geothermal energy finally done, it means that we can, when we flick that switch, transform this island in terms of greening of the island, in terms of our credentials and our ability to boast that we are the greenest place on planet Earth. The cost of doing business will be dramatically reduced. The ability to move our entire transport system to electric cars, electric scooters, that kind of thing. I think that the future is very exciting if we can harness this renewable energy. And I think now with the partnership with the Caribbean Development Bank and the approval of some $17 million US, we have excellent momentum in relation to renewable energy.
And so that will start, that project's going to start
The project has already started because we've already out to bid for the
Okay.
drilling. So the bidders have been engaged. I believe that the bidding was extended until the 9th of March. They've now asked for further extension because there was some need for clarification. So now that has been extended to the 9th of April.
Okay.
But we expect that there's tremendous interest. I'm told that there are over 30
Wonderful.
companies that have shown interest in the bidding. So once that's done, we expect that drill rigs should be on this island by June. We are hopeful that we can still maintain that date. And if we can maintain that date, it means that with the drilling done, we hope the drilling will be done in about 6 months. We then move to the next phase, which is the plant construction. So all in all, I'm hopeful that this can be done in this term, and I think that will be absolutely revolutionary. The final measure that I think we're working on very closely is agriculture.
Yes.
We realized during COVID that there was an absolute need for us to feed ourselves. And we were panicked in the cabinet. We said, if those boats didn't come from Miami, what would happen
Right.
here? And so we decided, and the 35-acre fruit orchard, for example, at Indian Castle has been one of our responses. We have engaged with greater technology, particularly with some of our younger farmers who are using shade houses to produce. We now see our greens, our microgreens, and all of that on the shelves. So the truth is that we have made some effort in that regard. We're going to continue to build that out. The next big thing we're going to do here is the poultry industry. We've already started that. We've already bought the slaughter facility, which is a sort of ready-made type facility.
Okay.
We're going to acquire some lands. We're in negotiations to acquire some lands to situate that industry there. And so, yeah, we see that there's room here for diversification. Not just talking about
Right.
it, we're actually doing
taking
it.
some action.
We're actually doing it,
Wonderful.
absolutely.
So, okay, just going back to the pandemic for a moment. No one was prepared for it. Everybody was surprised by it. We had a task force set up, a local task force, national task force set up. Are there discussions, whether it's locally, regionally, with regards to what if this was to happen again or something similar? Any plans in place? Any discussions being held? Any forums taking place?
I'm not aware of any forums that are taking place, but obviously we have lessons that we would have learned from this pandemic, which is still ongoing. In fact, just yesterday I heard that we had 2 cases of COVID here in Nevis. So it's just that I think it is no longer a headline.
Right.
We all appreciate now we have to live with COVID. And so we are getting on with our lives.
Right.
I think that's what humans do. But the truth is that there are valuable lessons that we have learned. I'm not aware that there are forums discussing what might happen in the future, but I think from this, it demonstrates that those who acted quickly, decisively,
Right.
those who acted early, those who kept their cool, because that was
And didn't
didn't panic, that was critical. And I'm very pleased that the island of Nevis at that time had a government in place that we were taken by surprise, as you say. We did not know what to expect,
Right.
but we were willing to take advice. We were willing to accept that we did not know, and we were willing to listen. And every opportunity I get, I recognize Dr. Judy Nisbet because she led the Nevis task force with tremendous aplomb. She and her colleagues really did an exceptional job and kept us safe. That establishment of the task force, for example, there was a federal task force,
Yes.
but I determined and the cabinet determined that that would not be sufficient to deal with the needs of Nevis on the ground.
Right.
And so we independently set up our own task force in
Right.
Nevis. And so it is to Dr. Nisbet and her team that we primarily went for guidance, and they did a stellar job. And so I would want to congratulate her and the members. We owe a debt of gratitude to them.
Excellent. So, I was listening to your address.
Which address?
Your press conference.
Press
address.
conference, okay.
And you were talking about tourism, expanding tourism, developing tourism, of course. And I was happy to hear you talk about training, and the fact that the locals sometimes don't manage to reach to the levels where they're certainly capable of reaching to, about training. So just expand on that a little bit in terms of what are the thoughts in terms of providing some kind of training facility for locals.
Well, we've had the ambition to have a hospitality institute here of some kind for a very long time. We simply haven't had the resources to do it. And we're even now seeking partners to see whether we can provide maybe some land for somebody to build something, or to provide some incentives for somebody to acquire something, to transform it into a sort of hospitality center. That aside, however, we are very keen to offer training opportunities. In fact, through the Nevis Tourism Authority, we have just offered a scholarship for, I think it's a 10-week culinary training
Yes.
in the UK. These are initiatives that we intend to continue to take. The government continues to support financially those who are interested in going off for training. But we need, I think, and that's the point I was seeking to make, to get to a point where our education system is closer aligned with our developmental needs.
Right.
Because even some people who study tourism are still not coming back with the skill sets that I think we need to grow and develop our industry. So a lot of theory, perhaps, a lot of studies, perhaps, but in terms of saying, okay, what does St. Kitts and Nevis need? What does the Caribbean need?
Right.
And even within the Caribbean, we have different products. In fact, even within St. Kitts and Nevis, we have
Yeah,
different
very
products.
much so.
Because while St. Kitts is largely mass tourism and the cruise ship industry, Nevis is not.
Right.
So we have to be able to see how we can get an education system that is more tailored and that's fit for purpose. So it's an observation. I think that it's one of the curiosities about our Caribbean region that we're so heavily dependent on
Yes.
tourism, but very little has gone into preparing our people to take the commanding heights
Right.
in that industry. And we take the Four Seasons as an example. They've been here for over 30 years. And we can probably count on one hand the number of local people
Right.
who have ascended to the heights. We've never had a local general manager at the Four Seasons. We've never had a local resort manager at the Four Seasons. The question is, why not after 30 years?
Right.
And so it tells me again that our people need themselves to prepare and that we need to grasp the opportunities, because when I've asked that question of the Four Seasons, particularly their ownership, one of their standard responses is that, well, they have an in-house training mechanism. Part of that is that they encourage workers to apply for positions throughout the Four Seasons network internationally, and that they have found that Nevisians do not apply. They're not interested in leaving Nevis. And they're saying that that is how you climb the ladder in their company. They want you to leave here and go to Chicago and go to South Africa and go to Taiwan and go to places where they have Four Seasons hotels
Right.
and
I mean,
train.
there are some, Alva and this
But
gentleman
very
Sweden.
few, very,
You
very
know.
few. You can count them on one
Yeah,
hand
yeah.
after 30 years.
Right. Yeah, there should be far more.
After 30 years. So this isn't as if it's a new company to us.
Right.
Four Seasons has been here
Seasons.
for a generation. And in that generation, we have not trained up our own people. We're still bringing in chefs. We're still bringing in accounting managers. We're still bringing in resort managers. So it really tells us that while we welcome, of course, investors and we welcome others coming here to work, that we ourselves need to aspire to not just work at the hotel,
Right.
but
To
to
lead.
be in leadership positions at the hotel. And we need our people to start to think that way.
Right. So you are obviously the leader of the island. I don't think this has ever been asked of you. I've never heard you share this. So tell us, how would you describe your leadership style?
I think in terms of leadership, it's always a learning curve. In the sense that anybody who tells you I'm a born leader or I know it all, that's probably nonsense. I learn new things every day. In terms of style, I try to be as inclusive as I can. The cabinet and my colleagues in cabinet, they will confirm that we have a discussion, a robust discussion in
Right.
cabinet. I come sometimes with ideas, and by the time they're dissected by my cabinet colleagues, we abandon it. It's a bad idea.
Right.
Colleagues come the same way, and there's a cut and thrust that I think we get benefit from when one seeks to be inclusive. The problem, of course, in terms of leadership, it can be a very lonely place, and sometimes there are difficult decisions that need to be made,
Yes.
decisions that you know are going to have an impact, sometimes even on persons that are close to you. So that makes it difficult. But I think that my style, I would say, is inclusive. I try definitely to get the views of all on board and ultimately try to make the best decisions that we can, realizing that even the best decisions sometimes are not going to be satisfactory to some people.
Absolutely.
But I was inclusive. That's what I try to do.
Okay. So thank you, Premier Brantley, just for allowing us to have a few moments of your time today. I know how busy you are. Thank you for sharing. We look forward to the next 5 years and wish you all the best as you continue to lead
Thank you.
and lead the tourism industry.
But thank you very much, and we look forward to prosperity, much more prosperity for the island of Nevis. I think that we're onto something very good here. We're on the cusp of something very good. And I think all of us working together can definitely get the Nevis that we deserve. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. You're
Good.
welcome. Okay, we say thank you to the Premier of Nevis, the Minister of Tourism, Mark A G Brantley, for being our guest on the Tourism Trail today. We'll see you again next week. Bye for now.
Nowhere but my